We didn't put enough together again for 48. I thought, again, we just got kind of out-hustled, just out-athleted, out-toughed a little bit at the basket in the first half. Second half was obviously better as far as that. It's just searching for lineups that would be able to go out there and play a little more physical and play a little bit better together.
They out-athleted us. They out-hustled. They out everything. So how does the coach compensate for a lack of athleticism and all that stuff? So, again, I'm not a fire the coach guy. I don't think Nick Nurse is the problem here. Somebody texted in earlier, why Nick Nurse is overrated. He won the championship because of Kawhi. You win an NBA championship not because of the coach. You win the NBA championship because you have great players. He won the championship with Kawhi Leonard. When Kawhi Leonard left that team, he did a good enough job to get that team back to the playoffs when everybody thought they would fall apart. He kept that team competitive. Nick Nurse, that's what the coach does. Okay? That's what coaches in the NBA do. We have this misconception that the coach controls all of these things and controls all these guys. One thing I will say, the coach does. They do control the playing time and the rotations and that kind of stuff. I think that Nurse has not done a very good job of getting some familiarity and some flow with his rotations. One night, Yabasali's in the rotation. The next night, he's not. Then he's playing a lot of minutes. It just seems that there are so many times where, last night he played 11 different combinations in the game, and you're just like, what is going on here? So I do think Nurse has some accountability here. I'm not giving him no accountability. But to me, this is way more than just Nick Nurse is not doing a good job. This is way more than that. But you have to acknowledge, even someone like me who I'm not a big blame the coach guy. You have to acknowledge that if this team continues to go down the road of where they're going, how do they fix it? You can't trade Embiid and all that stuff. So let's bring in Devon Givens, PHLY Sixers, set to join us now on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Well, Devon, we've got a bleep storm on our hands here. 2-14 and a lot of questions that I don't know that have answers to, man. I don't know if these questions even have answers to, but let's start with one. Give me your thoughts on how this team is 2-12. What are some of the key reasons in your mind on how we got here?
Of course, you'll go with the injuries early on, Mike, because of who was out, Embiid being out, Paul George also, and Tyrese Maxey having to carry the load all by his lonesome. But we know that didn't really materialize with Tyrese Maxey as just the number one guy with the rest of the players surrounding him. So then I would go with the poor offensive production. They are one of the worst teams offensively, Mike, in the NBA, and that includes the three-point shot, which we know is so important in today's game. They can't hit outside shots. And defensively also, they have their breakdowns, specifically in the third quarter. Derek Bodner of our show likes to point this out. He pointed this out very early, and it has maintained as one of their big problems as part of their defense, number one, but also third quarters where they cannot score against the opposition. So I would line up those things of the injuries, but not necessarily number one, with the stars. Number two being the offensive production that has been poor, and defensively they have been real bad, also one of the worst in the NBA.
All right, so did we overvalue what this roster was?
I don't think so, because the one reason that we thought, Mike, that this team would be good was everybody playing their roles within the team structure of playing with the big three of Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and Paul George. We only got about 7 minutes of that on November 20th for the very first time when the season started in October. So for us to say that we overvalue, not necessarily just because we haven't seen them again in their design roles to play off of those three stars, but with it, I did think that, Mike, they would be much better even in those games where Embiid would maybe miss one with Maxey and Paul George out there together, and you would have Kelly Oubre, Caleb Martin, and you just go on Eric Gordon, et cetera, to where they could still pull out some close games because of Maxey being the lead, Paul George being there with him. They would take turns being the stars that particular night. if not both, on that particular night, and then the role players playing their role and maybe stepping up just a bit. But as I've been saying, everybody's been playing above their level, and they're not good. They're simply not good enough. We've seen now 14 games in that the players being asked to do more than they should are not good enough to do that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we overvalue what the roster was as it was put together by Daryl Morey, Elton Brandon in the front office this offseason. Because again, we still haven't seen them as a complete team to really gauge how good the role players are off of those stars.
Devon Givens, PHLY Sixers. Check out their YouTube show after every Sixers game. You know, I tuned in the other night, and it drove Derek and Kyle to drink. I mean, that's how bad this team has been. They were throwing down a couple cold ones because the team was so bad on Monday night.
Yeah, I almost did too, Mike. And, you know, I don't drink. I almost did.
But you had a nice Blue Chew reference in there that kept you nice and cool. I did catch that one. How culpable – I'm not a big blame the coach guy. All right, everybody always wants to fire the coach. It's always the coach's fault. How culpable in this spot is, in your mind, Nick Nurse and what he is doing with what he has?
I am not a big blame the coach guy that much, but I will lay some at the feet of whomever we're talking about. In this case, I gave Nick Nurse. I know I talked to you during the playoffs and before the postseason last season, where I would talk to you about not putting so much on Nick Nurse because he did not have Embiid for 30-plus games. Tyrese Maxey was out for a month with an injury. The James Harden part of it that started the season off, and they just had a bunch of role players, and they weren't going to be good enough. And then they run off to 8 straight to get to the postseason. We saw what happened. They finished in 6 games, and their offseason is complete. Here we are again, where it's not an excuse. It's a fact that their 3 stars have been down at some period of time for an extended period of time for this basketball team. And as the losses continue to build up, their absences are magnified. And then you're talking about, once again, these other players being elevated. Now, I say all that to say, though, you cannot have Yabusele playing the way that he did, 17 points, making 4 or 5 threes that he did last night. And he's on the bench in the fourth quarter, Mike, when that game was still up in the air. As you saw, the Sixers did make a run, and they did come back. Paul George is out for the remainder of the game because of left knee hyperextension again. And Yabusele's on the bench. That's the coach making that decision. Yeah. That's the coach to put Andre Drummond in the game to start the fourth quarter for Joel Embiid instead of Yabusele. Yabusele may have been fatigued because of all the minutes that he did play. But guess what? That was 19 minutes that he played through 3 quarters. We've seen him play many more minutes and still be productive for the things that he was out there doing. And honestly, we know that they were more athletic in the front court for the Memphis Grizzlies, but they weren't that much bigger than him. They can get up that second jump, that first jump much quicker than him. But Nick Nurse needed to have him in there. That said, when you're 2-12, some things, though, do have to have the finger pointed back at the head coach for maybe lack of a point, case in point, the Yabusele piece, maybe not having the right rotations at times, leaving guys out there a little bit longer. Why is Paul George before last night's injury? Go back to the Miami Heat game or even the game before against Orlando. Why is he on a minute restriction when he's seemingly not supposed to be on a minute restriction and letting this guy loose? Sure, give him some time off. He needs a breather. He is no longer 24, he's 34. But those are the things, unless it's being communicated by the player, hey, I need a breather, and a run happens, and that's not the player's fault. Some of that stuff does lay at the feet of the coach, and he has to take some responsibility for a 2-12 record.
No question. I do question. He had 11 different combinations last night. I agree. I think Yabusele needs to start. I think he needs to be the stretch 4 on this team. Martin goes to the bench. I think he's much better in that role. That said, how far do they let this go before somebody becomes culpable?
So the way we've talked about it, I'll give Kyle Neubeck credit, mentioning both Derek Biden and Kyle Neubeck from the show. I'll give him credit because he brought up the 20 loss number if they're still in single digits. At what point? And if they get to, let's say, 5-20, Mike, something's going to happen. You're not going to trade any of your players because you have the December 15th rule, of course, for a lot of them, especially KJ Martin with the new contract and all. Embiid, George, Maxey, they're not going anywhere. The only other candidate.
Well, just to be clear, too, because this keeps coming up, Devon, Embiid is not eligible to be traded, even if they wanted
not
to.
For the season.
He cannot be traded until March, which is after the trade deadline. So all these people who keep texting in to get rid of Embiid, that is not an option.
No, so that's not happening. So the only other thing that you could do is to attack the front office or the head coach. It's not going to be any assistant coach because we don't talk about the assistant coaches. We talk about the head coach or the front office. So I would say if they are through 25 games or 27 games and we're looking at 7-20, Mike, and they have not shown much improvement, someone's going to take a fall because we can no longer use, and I've been a big culprit of it, of trying to calm people down early on, 2-10, 2-7, 2-8, whatever the number is. Hey, guys, you're only 3.5 games out of 6th place. Let's see when these guys come back. Well, now another player is injured again. We don't know if he's going to be out for a period of time. Same hyperextension for that left knee. He missed 2 weeks in Paul George. And if this thing continues to spiral, even with a 3-game homestand upcoming, not an easy schedule. Brooklyn is better than they are right now, but they should not lose to the Brooklyn Nets on Friday night. Then you have Sunday, James Harden and the Clippers return, and you don't know what that's going to look like. They've been playing okay basketball. And then you have the Houston Rockets, who have also been much improved this early part of the season before going on the road again. So if they through 27 games and we're looking at a single-digit number with 20 losses, I think the conversation will really start to spark up amongst the Sixers fan base, maybe on your show, our show as well, because something would then have to give.
His show is PHLY Sixers on the PHLY Sports YouTube channel. It's Devon Givens who covers the Sixers. And, of course, everything that has happened in the locker room, the meeting, the reports coming out afterwards, now the fallout from Embiid. What is your take on the last 72 hours of what happened in Miami to where we are now and everything that we've kind of put together of Embiid's reactions, the context of the meeting, how it even got out there?
Well, the first part of it, the meeting needed to happen, in my opinion. Again, we're talking about 2-11 team. So something needed to happen, something needed to be discussed, and they discussed it. Now, all of the stuff being leaked thereafter, I'm one in the minority, and with the few people that I have talked to, I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it being leaked because somebody needs to be called on the carpet for this. As you said, Mike, at what point does someone get fired? Well, the thing that starts off, if you're not going to get fired, is these notes or this information is going to be leaked somehow, some way. And while I'm a big proponent of things staying in the locker room, you know what? After all the bad press that they had, the lack of communication where things were not shared a little more than the way we would have liked as far as information with Embiid and a few other things. With this one, I didn't mind it because, look, we've been dealing with this stuff with Joel Embiid for many years. He's gotten so much better at his tardiness, at being a better teammate. Not that he was a bad teammate. It was just more of he was to himself. And that's been public, where he's gotten so much better in doing things involving with his teammates and being a closer teammate, if you will, as the leader of this basketball team. So with it, actually, Mike, I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it at all that it got out. Now, his reaction of
he wasn't too happy. He was not too happy.
Well, you know why? Because, again, the finger was pointed at him. Mm-hmm. Once again, this is the second time in 2 weeks that the finger's been pointed at him. And as a result, you're the star of the team. Hey, go out there and handle it. You can even handle the media better. You came out after that closed-door meeting and said, what meeting? All right. You didn't have to say what happened like we later found out. But to say, there was something that needed to be discussed. We discussed it as a team, including the coaching staff. It had to happen. It needed to happen. And hopefully we respond to this much better tomorrow night against the Memphis Grizzlies. But that's not what he did. And as a leader, you need to be better at answering that question as well. You know me. I'm one that has stood up for Joel Embiid plenty of times. But he was wrong on this one. And even saying what he said, someone said it. I don't know who said it. There are a number of candidates that we could all go to and guess who leaked this information out. Well, now that he said it, he needs to find out who said it, because if he's going to do that and put it out there in the orbit like this, find out who said it in your, somebody stand up and do this where this is not a problem and you guys get it together and they fix this stuff. So something needed to happen. It happened and he's upset. Well, so be it. We're all upset. You're 2-12 and this cannot happen for a team that I thought might quite possibly, not necessarily a 2-12 record we'd be talking about starting the season, but certainly not 12-2, but certainly not 2-12.
Well, and before we get you out of here, Devon Givens, PHLY Sixers. You know, I talked about when LeBron went to the Heat. That's a better big three, and they were 10-9. You know, so even if this team is 7-7 after 14 games, I think we would have been disappointed. But
yes,
the realistic point is, part of this is you got a lot of guys who have never played together. There's a lot of new faces. I would say this about Nurse. He's in a really unenviable task. You go to training camp, the whole team's offense is based around Embiid. Well, he's not there. What kind of offense are you inserting? How do you insert what you want to do when the key guys to insert are not there to do it? Because when Embiid doesn't play, their offense is completely different. So did you install a whole offense in the Bahamas? Now, he didn't even practice in the Bahamas. So what did you do there? What did you learn? What did you gain from training camp? Nothing.
Well, I would say that what they did, knowing that Embiid would be out, and we had already figured this, Andre Drummond was going to have a much bigger role as a starter when Embiid is not there. So to your point, installing two different offense, the Tyrese Maxey, Paul George offense with Andre Drummond at the 5 with Kelly Oubre and Caleb Martin, that was one offense that you install, and the other is the Embiid offense that you install as well. And he could walk through some things. He can do those types of things as a guy, but you know there's nothing like actually going through it and playing it, even in a practice setting. So I would say what they did was they did try to Tyrese Maxey, Paul George-led offense, which would also be those same type of minutes if Embiid did play, but he's now off the floor, and Maxey and George are running the offense with the second unit. I think that's what they did. But then when the injury happened to Paul George against the Atlanta Hawks in the preseason, that threw a monkey wrench in everything. And then it's just the Tyrese Maxey offense playing with everyone else. So it's not to make an excuse for Nick Nurse. It's just to answer your question of what were you doing at training camp? They believed they were going in with the Maxey George offense until Embiid was ready to come back. But that got, again, thrown out of the window when the injury happened to Paul George. So we did not get a chance to see that against Milwaukee or anyone else.
And because Maxey did say last night, he's like, I keep trying to tell these guys, you got to do this. He's going to make you all better. But you haven't played with him yet, so you don't know where he wants to go. Devon Givens, PHLY Sixers. Those guys have content every day and after every Sixers game. Devon, we hope to catch up with you while this team is on its way back to 500. But right now, it don't look good, my friend.
It's not looking good at all, man. Not looking good at all.
All right, I'll catch up with you. Devon Givens, PHLY Sixers, here on the Sports Bash.